Hey everybody, I hope you're having a wonderful week. This particular PowerPoint presentation will help you to think about how you can take the concept of the T123 outline and really transform it for any size of research project. I find this to be a very flexible tool for creating projects anywhere from just a few pages to up to 30 pages. I've used up to 30-page document on with this outlining form, but easily I could imagine writing books off of this outlining form. So I'm going to work my way through to help you understand how to take and organize this information. I'm also going to go over some of the different kinds of paragraphs that should appear in a more sophisticated college level argument that would get up to that 10 to 12 page mark that we're looking for this particular paper. So you should have by now at least finished kind of a T123/45 outline in your mind of what you want to do with your research project. You should have, what do I believe about my topic and what are some of the reasons I believe it? And you really need to establish that, I think, no matter what type of writer you are, as I've said before, a T123 outline is the foundation of any kind of thinking that you would do before you start writing a paper. So let's think about how we can take this very simple format and turn it into something that can be used for a 10 or 15 or 20 page paper. Remember this is my basic outline. All girls should take hunter safety because no one should be afraid of guns and everyone should know about the laws surrounding guns, and a non-traditional skill can be very confidence building for girls, and giving girls this kinds of confidence in non-feminine activities help them to deconstruct the princess mentality that pervades our society. When you look at this simple outline, it only gives you one type of paragraph, and that is what I would call body paragraphs. A paragraph that argues for your position. That's what this kind of essay, this kind of paragraph does, that T123. But not all paragraphs in a research or in a book just simply offer evidence. Some of them do all different kinds of things. So we're going to discuss background information, opposing view paragraphs, rebuttal paragraphs, and any paragraph that might qualify or limit your argument. A paragraph that offers background information. In most longer essays, you'll have at least one, if not more, background paragraphs. These paragraphs offer the reader valuable information they need in order to discuss the context of an argument. In a background paragraph, you might include important history, definitions, the political climate, the context of the argument that the argument appears in. This list could be endless. The big picture is, what does your reader need to know in order to give your argument a fair judgment? What kind of background information do they need to be aware of? The next kind of paragraph might be a qualifying paragraph. Not all essays need this, but often any qualifiers might appear in the background, but you might need a special qualifying paragraph of its own in your essay depending on the topic. A qualifier is anything that might make your argument invalid. For example, in a prominent medical journal, scientists today published that they were able to inject mice with diabetes with a hormone that allowed the mice to regrow the cells that produce insulin. This new therapy could prove to revolutionize the way we treat patients with diabetes. Unfortunately, it only seems to work in patients with type 2 diabetes at this point. Note that the qualifier is underlined. It's a condition under which the thesis might become untrue. That would be a qualifying paragraph. And this, if you were to write about this new therapy, this particular essay would need a separate paragraph that talked about why it would only work with patients with type 2 diabetes. Another type of paragraph would be an opposition paragraph. College level arguments nearly always acknowledge and discuss what the opposing parties think about their thesis statement. An opposition paragraph usually begins with a phrase that looks something like, the opposition believes, ... Note, this is super important to me. Do not disregard this. It is essential for the integrity of your argument that when you discuss the opposition, you do so fairly. You record their position faithfully as if you were one of them. You then refute them in your other paragraphs. But when you're talking about the opposition, you should always, in the opposition paragraph, when you're relaying their position to your reader, you should do so as if you were one of them. You should do so fairly. Rebuttal paragraphs rebut the previous argument. There are two kinds of these. After your paragraph presenting the opposing view, you might rebut that argument. Near the end of the essay, you might allow the opposition to voice some concern about your argument. And then, of course, you would follow up with another rebuttal, refuting their rebuttal. So that process of allowing the opposition to speak in your argument, it actually strengthens your argument and makes you seem more fair and even-handed. It's super important. This is the layout that I suggest. I've found that this particular layout really makes for a strong argument. And if you could think of each of these as perhaps even a section, the example essay that I've provided for you that I've worked through and provided as an example about the uh, wild horse issue, each of these pieces is actually a section in that essay. So for example, I think I have 2 paragraphs in my background section. I think I have 1 or 2 paragraphs in opposition, and then my 1, 2, and 3 reasons. I think each of those is at least 1 or 2 paragraphs. So if you think of them as not one paragraph necessarily, but as a section, then these essays become much more complex and they can grow in length to the 10, 12 page mark that we're looking for. So this is the suggested layout, and this is the layout that I've used for my essay. You start with an introduction that ends with a thesis. You offer background information. Then you allow the opposition to state their strongest position. You can then write immediately, offer rebuttal to the strongest position, or go straight into your reasons paragraphs and let your reasons rebut their argument. So then you have your reasons, 3, 4. I wouldn't do less than 3, but you could even go up to 5 if you need to. 5 reasons why you believe your position is true with evidence. Then you have a moment where you allow the opposition to talk about one of your arguments to show how they would respond to it, but then you respond back to that. And then finally, you offer a conclusion. So once you've established your basic outline and you've put each of these sections in, you can kind of make a plan. This is a real skeletal version. And if you look at the example that I've provided, the wild horse, you'll notice that I have a 3-page outline that then becomes a 12-page paper. You're going to need a longer outline for a longer paper. But I just put the framework in and then I start making a plan and I work a little bit at a time. So once I've got a particular section, I focus in a bit. So here I've listed one of my reasons on the screen why girls should take hunter safety, and that's that no one should be afraid of guns. And then as I expanded my outline, I said, I plan to talk about how if you're going to have one in your home, you shouldn't be afraid of guns. And then I actually put my quote directly in to the outline. When I make an outline, I always put full direct quotes in my outline. I don't think about whether I'm going to paraphrase, summarize, or direct quote at that time. I put all of my information as I copy and paste it as direct quotes. And that's because at the time that I'm making the outline, I'm just gathering information. I'm thinking, what is it I want to discuss in this paragraph? And I'm not really thinking about how I want the paragraph to look as an end product. I just want to gather all my quotes together in a place where it's organized for me. Also note that when I do put it in the outline, I immediately put in my in-text citation. Cite as you go. That is one of the most important mantras of good research. it's a really, really dangerous thing to plan to do your citing at the end of your project, because when you get a 12-page paper and you're looking at something like, oh, 20 direct quotes and then another 15 or so paraphrases and summaries, and you've got all of this information, it's so easy to lose track of where these bits of information came from. So my rule is the minute it hits my project, I cite it, because right then I'm looking at the document. I've got the document I'm citing from right then in front of me. So I know what author it is. I know what page number it is. So I immediately put the citation in as I go. But I always do it as a direct quote. I don't make the decision about whether it's going to be a paraphrase or a direct quote until I'm actually writing my paragraphs. So when I have enough information in my outline and I get ready to start writing, I take that outline and I save it as a rough draft. And then I tend to work one paragraph at a time. I turn each section of the outline into a paragraph, and I do this pretty systematically. I take the first, maybe I'm working on, and I don't always work in the order that the outline is put together, but I decide which paragraph am I going to work on now. And I look at that section and I turn it into double space, and then I start writing I've got my topic sentence there because that's how I create my outline, is by putting my topic sentences in. And I've got a quote there, so there's my evidence. And then I start writing my explain. And then I go up and I look at my evidence and I say to myself, do I really want this to be a direct quote? If I do want it to be a direct quote, do I want the whole thing to be a direct quote, or do I want to have part of it paraphrased? And I make those decisions as I'm doing my rough draft. Spiraling writers, your strategy might be to free write about each section and then see how you can incorporate quotes into that. Um, you've got to figure out what works best for you. I always believe that the writers should figure out how they work best and then use that strategy over and over again. But for me, the strategy is save my outline as a rough draft and then transform each section of my outline into paragraphs. Finally, I'd like to say this: take the time it takes. It will take less time. So many writers think they don't have time to outline, and they want to just, set a pile of research next to their desk, sit down and start writing, and just incorporate research as they go. And I'm telling you that it takes less time if you outline. Your outlines don't have to look exactly like mine. You might want to write a web. There's any number of ways you might want to do it. And you have to figure out what works with your brain and with your writing style. But outlining and organizing will save you a lot of time. Just think about this. How many times have you started and then thrown away a draft because you realized you didn't have enough evidence to prove the point you wanted to make? Or you wrote out a giant jumbled mess only to spend literally hours moving and deleting and adding. Nothing seems to make sense. If you start with an outline, with a plan in your head, and that has been literally written down on paper, and that you've thought about how you're going to approach it before you start writing, you're going to save yourself a lot of time. Outlining the right way will save you a lot of grief in the long run.